So, hi, Jessica.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk with you. You are one of the most sort of purposefully productive people that I know. So I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. So let me just read your bio just for folks who kind of already know you, and then we can jump in.
Okay.
So, Jessica N. Turner is the author of the best-selling book, The Fringe Hours, Making Time for You, which encourages women to practice self-care and make time for their passions. Jessica practices what she preaches as she juggles writing a popular lifestyle blog, being a mommy of 3, and working full-time. She founded her blog, The Mom Creative, in 2006. Wow, it's been 10 years. And it has evolved to include a wide spectrum of content, including pieces about parenting, crafting, and frugal living. A trusted voice in the blogosphere, numerous brands, including Southwest Airlines, Maytag, P&G, World Vision, Shark, American Crafts, World Market, and Hallmark, have partnered with Jessica for features on their products and services. Jessica's writing can also be found on HuffPost Parents, Parenting.com, and Daysprings Encourage. An award-winning marketing professional, Jessica spent more than a decade working with clients in healthcare, banking, and higher education. She currently works for one of the nation's top healthcare institutions, developing social media and content strategy. And Jessica and her family live in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee. And is it beautiful today, or what is the weather
It's
like?
not beautiful today. Today it is raining. I think all my tulips are going to be gone after today. We are maybe even going to get some tornadoes tonight. Fingers crossed. My husband was like, pray that it does not get sunny, because if it gets sunny, tonight is not going to be good. So,
really? Wow.
yes, bad storms today, but otherwise it's warm, so I'll take that.
So in a tornado, do you do anything? Do you have to board up windows, or I don't know anything about tornadoes?
Oh, no, you don't board up windows with a tornado, but you do have to go to like an area without windows on the lowest level of your home. So for us in Nashville, it's very rocky. And so most people don't have basements. We don't have a basement here. And so we'll go into like closets, basically, that are not on the first floor with pillows. My kids wear helmets in case, something were to fall.
Wow.
But that is what you do. We have apps on our phones so we can listen to the weather.
Wow.
And my husband, I think he should have been a meteorologist. He gets really into the weather and is monitoring everything. And so he is like, we need to get to our safe place. Where I'm like, we're on a hill. Tornado can't run through here. It's going to get caught by the hill. But he's like, get in your safe place. So we might be in our safe places tonight.
Wow. In your safe places. Well, hopefully not. So I kind of want to dive in and just sort of talk to you about this idea of, this big word that is productivity, and sort of how that relates to kind of the life and the work that you've sort of developed for yourself. I mean, maybe it would be most useful if you sort of give back a little bit more background into what you do and who you are and how it related to really writing The Fringe Hours, which is just such an awesome book about figuring out, what matters to you and making the time for it, essentially. But yeah.
Well, I feel like I'm a bit unusual in the blogosphere in that I do have a pretty decent following online. I've been doing it for a long time, but I work full time outside the home. So I think those two things in and of itself, particularly with the topic that I'm blogging about, which is memory keeping and photography and reading and crafting and all these things that people were often asking me, how do you do it all, right? How do you do it all? How are you doing these projects while working full time and blogging, and you have kids and all of that? And the answer really was that I don't do it all. If you could see beyond this rectangle here, you would see my house is a bit chaotic because certain things, you have to let go. But the answer was that in my fringe hours, in those pockets of time that often go underused or wasted, I was really harnessing those to do the things that I loved. And so the fringe hours is that permission slip for people to leverage that time for what they love instead of either wasting it or doing something that doesn't really matter, that isn't really investing in themselves. So yes, it does mean that I have to be productive with my work hours and get the work done that I need to do. But it also, I think, is being comfortable with sometimes good enough is good enough. And it doesn't need to, I don't need to spend 3 hours on photos that I could do in 15 minutes or whatever the case may be for me. And so It's been fun. It's been fun talking to women and hearing different stories of kind of where they are on their journees or what it looks like in their life. Because certainly my story is going to look different than your life. It's going to look different, from a person's life who lives maybe in Arizona, who has one kid or no kids. So I surveyed 2,000 women to find out how they were spending their time and what their challenges were. And that really became foundational for the Fringe Hours. And I think also makes it a more unique piece because it isn't just my own story.
It isn't just your own story. And you must be getting, now, the Fringe Hours is kind of blown up. It's now also being sold in Target. Now you must be hearing even more from women about how they really spend their time even after publishing.
Right. Well, and I'm doing more speaking as well. And so adding that into the mix, that travel component and going and speaking at big conventions and big events. And what does that look like, and not only for myself and traveling, but these different organizations that I'm talking to, whether it's a National Greeting Card Association or it's a conference for moms, those people, while they might seem different from the descriptions, are dealing with a lot of the same challenges.
That's really interesting. So kind of one of the first things you talk about in the Fringe Hours relates to this thing that I guess your husband once said about you, that, my wife gets done more from 5 to 9 in the morning than, most people get done from 9 to 5 throughout their whole day. And so you say really early on in the book, I believe how you spend your 5 to 9 determines how you'll spend your 9 to 5. Can you kind of tell me more about what you mean? Tell us more about what you mean.
Yeah. I actually first heard that notion from a scrapbooking friend of mine, Stacey Julian, and she said that at a conference, that how you spend your 5 to 9 determines how you spend your 9 to 5. And so then that, as I was talking about that kind of became a joke with my husband that well, you're getting everything done from 5 to 9 compared to, most people all day. But I think the notion is, how do you set up your day? Right. So for me as a mom with 3 kids, I could choose to sleep until they wake up. And then get up, which is what a lot of people do. I'm not saying that that's bad, but you get up with that mode of, I have to get milk, I have to get cereal, I have to, serve these little people, right? Plus, I'm getting out of the house to go to work, right? And we've got to take kids to school. And so you start the day running really hard, really fast right away.
Right.
And I found that when I would choose to start my morning that way, because it's a choice to stay in bed, that I was more frantic, that I didn't feel as ready for the day as I would if I would get up ahead of my children. And I would take the first, 30, 60, 90 minutes, whatever it was that day, for myself and to do something that I loved. And often that was blogging. It was writing, because that was a quiet time. I'm not one of those people that needs coffee and needs a lot of time to get up and start doing that type of thing.
Right.
But I think for other people, it is like having that cup of coffee and sitting and just, doing reading. Sometimes I would scrapbook, particularly before I had 3 kids. I would get up in the early morning and I would do a little scrapbooking before I went to work. But I was doing something that fueled myself. And so when I took care of myself first, and then had the cries for mommy and milk and cereal and getting ready and doing all of those things, I found that I was happier because I had poured into myself first. And as I did research in this practice, I realized that it is a common phenomenon for very successful entrepreneurs and leaders and thought leaders to use their mornings in that way. Laura Vanderkam even wrote a book about what successful people do before breakfast, I think is what it's called. And it's so true. And I think it's a huge possibility as you look at your day for where your Fringe Hours can be found. That early bit of morning time is something that you can really take for yourself and that you can kind of figure out how much you want that to be. Do you want it to be 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 2 hours before everyone else wakes up? Whereas those other pockets of time are kind of more defined and maybe aren't as easy to harness in the same way.
Right. So it's really interesting that you talk about how you used to do scrapbooking in the morning, because there's another quote from the book where you say, self-care needs to be included in what you should be doing. It is not a privilege, right. It is a necessity. And I think many people, when they hear that, would kind of say, what on earth does that have to do with productivity? Why on earth are you spending time in the morning scrapbooking when you probably have a long to-do list that if you're going to get up, you should start getting going on that to-do list, right? So what's the idea behind this?
Yeah, I think it's just that you need to feed yourself and your creativity. With me being, I would consider myself a maker. Like a maker needs to make, right? Not just take, but like you've got to have that time to for yourself so that you aren't empty. The Fringe Hours came out in February 2015. And I had a baby December 31st, 2014. So within 6 weeks, I had a baby and had a book release. Wow. And so that year, I worked a lot physically with nursing and caring for a newborn, and also just the work that needs to go into a book release, plus having a full-time job once I went back to work after maternity leave. And so my barrel by December of 2015 was empty. I was at the bottom of my barrel, and it was because all of my Fringe Hours were going to work, really. I wasn't really practicing that self-care that I was talking about. I was having to, use that limited time that I had to promote the book and talk about the book, which I loved and was such a blessing to do.
Sure.
But it was a season of my life where I was not caring for myself in the same ways that I have in other seasons. And so I knew that January would be a big season for the Fringe Hours and people kind of doing New Year's resolutions and that sort of thing. And so I committed that after I kind of got through those first few weeks of the new year that I was going to take a blogging break, which was my first time in 10 years taking a dedicated break. And I was going to take 4 weeks. I ended up taking 5 weeks. I honestly should have probably done 2 or 3 months. But I took that time so that I could fill up a bit, so that I could be excited about my work again, so that I could make, so that I could not have the stress of a deadline in the same way, because my blog has become a business. I mean, it was something fun on Blogspot, with little scrapbooking pictures across the top, and now it's a business, right? And so when something becomes a business, it isn't filling you in the same way as a hobby would have. And so that was really important and a really good season for me to take that little bit of time and kind of refocus and re-energize. And I think that we need to do that. And I think too often we are working so much and trying to be so productive that we don't stop and breathe, and you will burn out. And I have seen that in my own life time and time again. And so I'm okay with leaving the laundry or having a little bit of dust on the fireplace or whatever it is so that I can take care of myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea, after I had my daughter 2 years ago, I experienced extreme burnout. I just had no idea. I don't know, I'd never really envisioned, obviously people say having a baby is hard or whatever, but I had never really envisioned sort of what the sleep deprivation would do to me. And I had never experienced that kind of burnout. And it's so funny because burnout is basically the least productive thing you could ever do because you can't do anything. And so doing things to prevent that should really be top of mind for people. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think so often we have an equation of what we think needs to be done, and we just don't include ourselves. And I think particularly for women who are moms, we think that we have to put ourselves last. Our children have to be above, everyone has to be above us, that if I need to cut something from the schedule, that I'm going to cut myself. And it's a terrible way to live. And as a mother thinking about the example I'm giving to my children, it's terrible. I don't want them to grow up thinking that you need to push yourself aside to get all of the stuff done. It's just not a good, healthy way to live. So it may take some attention.
When you took 5 weeks off blogging, and obviously your blog, it's not just a hobby, it's a business. There are going to be sort of financial repercussions to taking 5 weeks off. There's going to be readers who aren't going to like it. Maybe your traffic's going to go down, and obviously that has longer term financial implications. How do you make that decision to do that?
Yeah. So I always thought it would be blog suicide to do that. I knew of writers who stopped doing blogging while they were writing a book or whatever. And I thought that is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. But it actually was an incredibly lucrative month for me. And my traffic was fantastic. So a couple things that I did. One was by accident, was that it fell over being close to Easter. And my most popular post is an Easter post that ranks at the top of Google during the Easter season. It's a post about what to put in kids' Easter baskets. Amazing. That went viral on Pinterest, and now it continues to do well every year. I think it had like 100,000 hits in like 3 weeks.
That's amazing.
And it's at 4 years old, I think.
Amazing.
And that post is filled with affiliate links to Amazon. So my Amazon affiliate did fantastic. And I also had a couple speaking engagements that we kind of budgeted. We're going to kind of cover that gap. And then I had my VA schedule daily tweets and Facebook posts of old content, because 10 years of content, I mean, there's so much out there, right? So we have a spreadsheet of evergreen content, and she pulled posts to run on Facebook every day. So I had traffic that way automatically, regardless of the Easter post. So I was getting daily to the site. And so I think that, and then I was still active on Instagram, and did a couple affiliate things, a couple sponsored posts then. I did do, I think, one sponsored Twitter party during that period of time too. So it was not a financial hit for me at all to take that break. And I think that's a really, it was a good reminder to me that all of the hard work that I have done has paved the way for this to be a more possible regular thing. Right. That I don't have to go another 10 years. I could take another break even 4 or 5 months from now if I needed to, or, that I don't need to publish every single day, right? Because that residual content gets so much traffic anyway. So how can I be more intentional about creating really good content, maybe less often? And so that was also, I think, a really good lesson for me.
And so is this something after you learned this lesson, is it kind of, do you have this goal now or this idea in your head, hey, maybe I should be taking regular sabbaticals or more regular time off? Because I assume you saw sort of amazing internal benefits to internal in terms of the way you felt and the way you approached your work when you came back.
It would have really helped me if my 14-month-old slept. He still doesn't sleep. So that would help. And so I think, yes, I think I will take another break. I know that I'm having surgery in December, and so that's going to be a forced break for me. But I think I might take one in the summer when my kids are off, and kind of before my little girl goes to kindergarten. That will be a really busy time with camp and that sort of thing, that maybe that would make sense. So I am thinking in terms of, okay, how can I plan these? Because I do think that knowing that 3 months out that this break was going to happen also set it up. And I have a word for the year, and this year it's rest. And so I'm really kind of navigating, and I think as I'm doing different experiments of trying to figure out what that looks like as a working mom, that some of this might come up and that I might be pruning different things from my life. But I love blogging. Aside from it being a business, it's something I just really enjoy. So it isn't something that I want to give up, but I do think that I need to pivot a little bit in terms of what that looks like in my life right now.
So I do the word for the year thing as well, and I would love if you could just share with people what that is and how you kind of came to the idea that you were going to do this.
Sure. So I am a huge fan of Allie Edwards. She is probably the most popular scrapbooker in the world. I have followed her since 2004, 2005, and she does a one little word is what she calls it. And so I have followed that journey for a while and never really thought it was something that would make sense for me. But I think in hitting that burnout phase of my life at the end of last year, I was like, I really need to make a change. How can I be intentional about this next year? And so it made sense for me choosing a word that's just kind of a mantra for yourself of how you're going to look through life, have a lens, maybe a perspective shift, something that you're going to be intentional about. And so for me, that word was rest, that everything that I do this year, I want to be coming back to how is rest applying to this. And that doesn't mean that I'm laying around eating bonbons or I am going to have amazing retreats in Italy, but it is being intentional of turning the television off, of reading more books, of saying no to things that I don't really want to do. I think I'm going to do like some exploration into yoga and meditation and, some of those different types of practices of people who seem to be really good at it and figure out what makes sense for my life. So I'm hoping that 2017, I'll have some really good practices in place that make sense for a busy working mom.
That's amazing. And so part of the goal of this is also to give yourself sort of the time and re-energization, re-energizing, but I don't know what the word is, to be able to kind of tackle things when you are working, I assume.
Absolutely. I mean, I have put off a blog redesign for 2 years because I was too busy, and that was my business, right? Wow. And so taking that month off, like, gave me the time to sketch and really think about what do I want the Mom Creative to look like, and finally get started on that, you know? And so I don't want to look back on my life and be like, man, I really wish I had done that. I really wish that I had made time for this or that. And so I think having that word rest and thinking about what that looks like, I don't know. I think it's going to be a good experiment for me this year.
I love that. So there's another quote from your book that made me think. So I'm a House of Cards fan, and
me too.
I saw some tweet recently that said something about someone talking about how busy they are in their life, and yet they were able to find, 12 or 14 straight hours to watch the entire season the day it came out, right? And I love this tweet because I felt like it was so, it's just so accurate, right? We say we're so busy, and yet we make time for the things we want. And you have this quote in your book where you say, you are never too busy to make time for what you love. It's just a matter of prioritizing, evaluating how you spend your days, and dedicating time for what you value. If something is really important to you, you will find a way to fit it into your life. Can you talk to me a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I think it is so true. I get so tired of people saying to me, oh, I really wish that I had the time for that. Oh, I really wish I could do that. I'm like, really? Because I work full time and have 3 kids. Like, I don't want to hear it. Like, you do have the time for it. You're just choosing to spend your time in other ways. One of the things that I really encourage people to do if they say, I don't have fringe hours, I can't make time for myself, is to track their time for a week. On fringehours.com, I have a little download that you can, so just a pretty spreadsheet basically, where you track how you're spending your time. And it's everything from the dishes and laundry to the meetings and the car commutes that you have in a week. And you can really see where those pockets of time are going. You can see that 14 hours of House of Cards that you spent watching, binging something on Netflix. Now, I'm a fan of a binge. I binged on House of Cards. It didn't happen in one day, but, I think that there's a time and a place for that, and it's fine to do that periodically, but recognize that that's how you're spending your time. Don't say you can't read a book when you watched House of Cards for 14 hours, And I interview you in the Fringe Hours, and you continue to be a huge inspiration to me and so many people that I speak to, that you read like 150 books a year. Like, I'm sorry, if Claire can read 150 books a year, I can read 20. So, it's how am I spending my time? And so I think that is something that people really need to be honest with themselves about what they're doing.
So what does your morning look like these days? Because we started this discussion kind of talking about how you make the time to get up in the morning. So what does it look like these days? Are you scrapbooking in the morning, or what are you doing before you go off to work?
Yeah, I wish I was scrapbooking in the morning. I'm not right now. Right now, my son is still not sleeping well. He's had chronic ear infections, and I think him being the last baby, I've babied him a little bit. I'll be honest with that. And so it's kind of like, we're going to rip that Band-Aid off and do cry it out. Is he going to figure it out? Like, last night he slept 7:30 to 4:15. And then he was up, like, for the day. Like, we'll go to sleep.
4:15.
4:15. I've been out of bed since 4:30. I went and gave him his passy. I'm like, please go back to sleep. 4:30. He's like hollering. No, not happening. So I'm sure he's asleep at daycare right now. So anyway, so we were up at 4:30. I gave him some milk, and then I tried to get him back to sleep. So I put him in he's real tiny. So I put him in his bouncy seat and was bouncing him, and I started writing. So I started working on a blog post that I had going up for today, and then for working on tomorrow as well. And then he was not going back to sleep, and so I was like, fine. So then I took him out of the bouncy seat, and he was crawling around, and I still was able to get a little bit of work done with him. But when I get up ahead of him, I still would probably be doing writing. I just wouldn't be as distracted with trying to get him to sleep or meet his needs. I also found, particularly during my break, that I would get up in the morning and just read. Just get some of that time for myself to do that, because I love doing that, and because right now I've been in a season where I've been going to bed really early because I'm getting up at 4:15. So I am in bed by 9:30 so that I can still get a good stretch of sleep. I think that's really important to get. I don't run well on 4 or 5 hours. So but then in the morning, all the kids are up by 6, and my husband's usually up at 5:45. So he watches the news and gets coffee, and I usually am cleaning up the kitchen. A lot of times I just leave the kitchen at night. I'll rinse the dishes and put the food away. But I'll do that, like dishwasher, get things loaded, kind of get things going in the morning. I try to be totally done by like 6:45, showered, hair done, all of that. And then help get the kids out of the door. Matthew takes the kids to school, so he leaves with all of them by 7:40 or 7:45. And then I usually have 30 to 45 minutes before I need to leave for work. And so I can finish up some things. I often do my photography in the morning for the blog before work, particularly in the winter months because it's dark when I come home. So I have to really be intentional of what do I need to shoot for the week on the site, or getting some tweets scheduled or that sort of thing, answering a few emails before I leave for the office. And I usually leave about 8:20 to 8:30 for the office. And then I'm there 9 to 5.
I mean, I love this because I, again, was reading some blog post at some point where some mom was saying how, it's great to have this advice from productivity people that says, get up and do your, biggest energy tasks right away and all that kind of stuff. But it's totally unrealistic if you have kids to take care of or a home to manage in those early hours. So it's so interesting to hear what you're doing in the morning, because obviously what you're doing is you're taking those pockets of time and you're maximizing them as much as possible.
Right. Well, and I tell people all the time, like, I never do laundry when my kids are sleeping. Like that is not that I can do that with them. I can be engaging with them. So I don't use like 5 a.m. Oh, I'm going to fold one more load of clothes. Like that is not happening, because that is time that's really sacred. And I think it's also really good to see chores happening. So I think it's also good for them to see me doing laundry or to involve them in, hey, go take these towels upstairs or whatever. So I do think that you have to make conscious decisions of what you're going to do and not do with that time. I could start cleaning my kitchen at 5 and that sort of thing, but there's no need to be doing that. What I can't do when they're awake is write. So that's what I'm choosing to do when it's quiet. But I do think it's important to recognize that there are seasons. And, I have moms say all the time, oh, I just had a 3-month-old. Well, if you just have, you have a 3-month-old, like life is going to look a little different, right? Like everybody you can't achieve what you're seeing on Pinterest necessarily when you have a 3-month-old and you're nursing and you're not sleeping. So I think giving yourself grace to recognize that when you're parenting, seasons are just that. They're just seasons, and things are going to change, and they change really rapidly. But I don't think that is an excuse to continue to put off your dreams. I mean, I released a book that hit the #1 on Amazon in every category 6 weeks after having a baby. And that was because I did a lot of work, right? And I'm not saying that to be arrogant, but I'm saying, like, I hate the excuse of, oh, it's a season, and so I'm just going to put this off. I don't think that you need to put it off. I just think that you need to recognize that it's going to take a little longer, or it's going to look a little different. What's the need to do versus the want to do? And so, like, I wanted to redesign my blog, but you know what? It didn't happen. That's okay. It still made a lot of money and was still very fun for me to do, even if the design wasn't the latest and greatest. Right. What I needed to do was work really hard on getting my book's message out there. Right. And I did that, and I feel like it was successful, even in a really busy, hard, tiring season, right? I love Sorry, that. I feel like I went on a soapbox there.
No, but I love that. I love the idea of just not putting off your dreams, because I think it's so easy to do that given the hamster wheel we are all on. This was super, super helpful. Can you tell folks where they can find you again, or remind people?
Sure. So my site is themomcreative.com. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Periscope at Jessica N. Turner. And then on Facebook, it's facebook.com/themomcreative. And then I've got the books here so you guys can see how pretty they are. So here's the Fringe Hours. It's embossed. And then the gift book is kind of like a guide. So if you feel like you get it and you just want to go through and figure out what it is for your own life, it's really pretty. And that is sold wherever books are sold, Amazon, Dayspring, Target.com, all of that good stuff, which is very, very fun. And the book's website is fringehours.com for both of the books. So
thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.